Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Nurturing Astrology podcast. I'm Dominique Jaramillo, your astrologer and host. I believe astrology can fast-track personal growth, improve relationships, and empower parents. On this show, I will bring you practical guidance and insight from my own work, studies, and life experiences, as well as interview experts to bring you stellar wisdom from other teachers and professionals to inspire you on your journey. I'm so glad you're here and thanks for tuning in. So sit back, enjoy the show, and be sure to follow, like, and subscribe to catch every new episode as soon as it drops. Your shares and reviews are also much appreciated to help more people benefit from nurturing astrology. Okay, let's dive into today's show. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Nurturing Astrology podcast. And today I'm here with Cornelia Hansen for another Circle Time chat. Hi, Cornelia.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to be doing another chat with you. And today, Cornelia and I want to talk about two really important planets involved in the growth process, and that is Jupiter and Saturn. So these two are so important for supporting your child through the different challenges they may face in life, the growth process itself, and helping them really understand and discover more of who they are and how they experience life. And we want to dive into just like the sort of the opening, if you will, the overview, if you will, because there's so much rich stuff in these two planets. They're so important for the growth process. And Cornelia and I have been working on our next two masterclasses on Jupiter and Saturn. It's going to be a double masterclass with a Q&A, a live Q&A. And since we've been working so diligently on putting all this information together, we thought, let's have a conversation about it. Let's do a little intro to the value of understanding these two in the chart and get you excited about it. And if you're interested, I'll share a wait list and people can join the wait list so we know, hey, yeah, we're in, and you'll be the first to know when enrollment's open for that next program. But this is a next step in our larger program that we're ultimately taking step by step with each planet and the value of it for nurturing your child's growth. And then we'll be able to put this whole compilation together for this whole chart, whole child program that we're creating. So today we're going to do an introduction of both Jupiter and Saturn and some insights about what they represent in astrology. Then we'll go into what these two planets bring to the area of life or the house that they sit in the natal chart, how they work together in growth and the developmental process, and then, of course, some parenting tips and strategies, right? We'll always throw those in because those are
we want those.
Yeah, we want those. So let's dive in, Cornelia. Let's talk about Jupiter first. Let's introduce Jupiter, what it represents just by nature. We know the keyword is expansion and freedom. And it also is faith and our belief system, right? Share overview of what Jupiter represents in the chart.
Oh, it represents adventure. I mean, if you've got a high place Jupiter, you like to travel, you like to be out in nature, you like to see new things, you like to understand other cultures, etc. So that's one of the things we can say, because Jupiter represents higher knowledge. It also has to do with the ninth house of education, past high school. It's anything that expands your awareness. It also has to do with abundance.
Yes.
Like, for instance, I have Jupiter in the second house. Okay, well, it's a blessing to have it in the second house, not because it brings me money. It isn't that it's made me wealthy. It's because that every time I've been in a tight space, something out of the blue would show up. I get a check in the mail for something I'd forgotten about, and it would just be enough to cover what I needed. So it's kind of like having an angel on your shoulder in the second house. You don't always have money, but you have it when you need it. That's the important thing. Absolutely. So it depends on where it is in the chart. So we always have to talk about things that are the negative side too, as well as the positive side. So with Jupiter, you can get exaggeration. You can get a person who's undisciplined. Maybe they're more sloppy in their work than other people might be. So it depends.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's that excessiveness, right? Jupiter is
Excessiveness.
go
Yes.
big or go home. It is, more is better. You know what I mean? So there can be that overindulgence, going to extremes, a little bit of recklessness, and,
Right.
like you said, undisciplined. And so where this is, there is this both sides, this blessing and abundance. Where this is in the chart for you or your child is kind of where there is that angel on the shoulder, where there is that protection, or things maybe come a little easier. And also where life takes on more meaning for you. There's more to experience, or things are, you do overdo things in that area, right?
Right.
It's like, I have Jupiter in the sixth, so I really I'm very detailed in my home. Like have to have things in order. I like things in order. And but I also like my freedom in my day. Right.
Right.
So it's like,
Yeah.
that's the freedom part of Jupiter, is like I like a lot of freedom and flexibility in my day to day, even though I
Yeah.
like
Now,
order.
I
Right.
might mention my son has Jupiter in the seventh house, and he's number one. He has more friends than anybody that I know. He still goes camping with kids from high school that he
Wow.
knew. So he's always had a surplus of friends, but it's also the house of marriage, and he has a very successful marriage.
There you go. So where Jupiter is can really be the area where success comes a little bit more easy, right? That's
Yeah.
the benefic part. And it's where we have to kind of also work, be a little bit wary of going too far, or, know when to restrain. And that brings us to Saturn, right? So Saturn, Jupiter comes before Saturn in the zodiac. Sag comes before Capricorn. So there is that expansion, and then we have restriction. So Saturn is responsibility, limits, lessons, tests. So that's where we want to bring that into form, right? Saturn is also hard work, dedication, persistence, that, earth energy. And also about our career and recognition, our life purpose. So finding purpose. So we learn all these things and these beliefs, and then it's like, okay, what do we do with it? Right. So share a little bit more about Saturn, and then maybe go into where, the things, how it manifests, where that sits in the chart.
Right. Well, Saturn is responsibility. It's also authority.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you've got 10, say Saturn in the 10th house, you may not realize your career early on. It may be something that you work towards later. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have it in the 7th house, which means that I had a difficult marriage and I married somebody older. Okay, then maybe, because Saturn always has to do with time also.
Yes.
It has to do with aging and elderly and commitment. But it also has to do with endurance. If you've got a good Saturn, it gives you that persistence to stick to things, whereas Jupiter can go off
Yeah.
off the rails, but
Yeah.
Saturn says, no, we've got to keep it in boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's always a good thing too. Okay.
Yeah.
Saturn, well, sometimes we say that Saturn represents the father figure, but I say it represents our view of authority. What did we learn as authority? And do we respect it or not? Did we learn responsibility or our
Yes.
actions?
Yes. I think that Saturn being the ruler of the 10th, and that parental access, a lot of times that 10th house is expectations that are placed on us,
Right.
and what kind of rules and structures, and how we respond to authority based on how it was,
Yes.
how it was taught to us, if you will, right, in our
Right.
childhood. And so Saturn is, on the one hand, like, it is where we can find success, but also over time and through hard work. Not necessarily like it comes quick and easy the way that it does things make with Jupiter, but it's like that persistence pays off kind of energy, right?
Right.
And it isn't necessarily going to be easy, but it's where the greatest lessons are going to come to really help us find our purpose and come into our sense of personal power and will, and know who we are, why we're here, what we're doing. And life purpose is huge. And we're always wanting to, as parents, help our children find what that is for them. And where Saturn is going to be a little bit where, like I said, where things might be a little bit harder, where there may be some struggle or limits, but also where they're going to learn their lessons. I know my son has Saturn in Libra, so I know he's going to learn lessons in relationship, and relationships may not be as easy, but he's going to value them. He's going to be dedicated to working on them, but there may be challenges there. And I'm already even seeing that with friendships sometimes a little bit, not in a negative way, but because he has high expectations of people, right?
Okay, well, I want to think about Saturn as the teacher. So
As the teacher.
Saturn is teaching you because it's exalted in Libra.
That's right.
That's right. So it has a lot to teach us about relationships. It's not really, you can look at it one way or the other. I always try to look on the positive side.
Of course, but it's being aware of the negative, but we want to focus on the positive. I think that's the benefit of parenting. And I do think if, we agree on the fact that most parents see or talk about Saturn or its placement and they start to get afraid, right? It rules fear. So you got to look at your own Saturn and go, why am I so afraid of my child's Saturn placement? Right?
Yeah, don't be afraid of your child's Saturn.
Yeah, it's where they actually can learn lessons and actually really come into their own and mature and find success and positive growth, right? So it's important to know where that is and to help them respect people, respect authority, respect themselves enough to stand up for themselves. There's a lot in that. So it's really, really rich. And with Saturn ruling elderly and maturity, like finding those role models and those mentors in their life, that father figure, that authority figure that really helps them, whether it's dad or grandpa or later on an certain instructor or teacher or somebody that comes into their lives that really helps them step up in through those challenges into knowing themselves more and really feeling stronger in who they are. So it's, Saturn is really, really important and amazing planet that should be more positively embraced.
Yeah, you have to think about it in terms of its place in the solar system. Jupiter comes first.
Yep.
Because we expand first and then we have restrictions, and that plays in mentally as well as physically. We have to learn restrictions. That's what happens when the Mars turns on. The kid runs up against those boundaries. Mom says no.
Yeah.
And then he's got to learn those boundaries. That's Saturn teaching him that he has to have responsibility for his behavior.
Exactly.
So these two things are always acting together. And remember that Saturn is the last planet before we get to the generational ones.
Yes.
Things that are going to affect the generation that we belong to. But these Jupiter and Saturn are the pair that get us through our development up to, through adulthood, because we don't stop going through different stages.
Right.
People think that once you're an adult, that's it. No, there are many growth stages to go through. We've all heard about the 40-year-old crisis, et cetera, the retirement crisis and the children leaving home crisis. I mean, these all are part of our development.
Absolutely. And there's cycles of the planets, right? So in the workshop or in the masterclass, we actually go through the first cycles of each planet. So we're going to go through that first through the Saturn return and the cycles through the Jupiter return, and give you that beginning one, because when you're raising kids, you really want to really understand those foundational first milestones so that you really lay that foundation for them. But yes, it never stops, right?
Right.
Never stops. So let's go into, we know that Jupiter is where opportunities come in to help us expand and attain more freedom in our lives and discover more of our personal truths and beliefs and values. But we also know that Saturn is where the lessons and the struggles and the challenges come in to help us mature and learn how learn what we're really capable of and how to discipline ourselves and actually take what we have and learn and experience and bring it into form or find our purpose or do something productive with it, right?
Right.
The world.
I think we've talked about Jupiter in terms of expansion. So if Saturn wasn't there, you would get a narcissist because they would have no boundaries.
Right.
It's what I feel, what I think, that's all important.
Right.
Uh, yeah, you have to have the boundaries and learn the boundaries.
Yeah, and with Jupiter, once you learn, that's the thing. When you go on this personal growth journey of like, what do I believe? How do I see the world? And it becomes so true for you. And you want to then be the teacher, right? The higher edge. I want to share what I've learned and what I know and feel to be so true for me. But then you start putting all your thoughts and beliefs on other people and not giving space for other people to have their own beliefs or their own, views of the world or what have you. And so Saturn comes in and goes, hey, let's have respect for what other people believe or what other people think.
Right.
Put yourself in someone else's shoes. And even though you're
Yes.
really excited and happy and you really feel passionately, Sagittarius, right, about all those things that you know and learn and have experienced, it's great to share that, but not impose that. And I think that when Jupiter tries to impose, Saturn comes back and says, no, 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 no. Boundaries, right? No
Yes.
limits. That's yours, not mine. And then you're hitting a wall that goes, oh, okay. And then you go, let me put myself in someone else's shoes. Let me try and look at this from a different perspective and learn. Where can I hold my authority and also allow space and respect for someone else to have their views and their opinions and their thoughts and ideas as well, right?
Right.
So Jupiter and Saturn clearly is huge in the growth and maturation process. So let's go into a little bit more about how they work together, right? So they show us and can help us help our kids develop that own belief system, right? And then help them overcome difficulties and challenges. And you have a really great, almost like biological example that I think is so awesome to keep in mind for how these two work together. So share that
Right.
example.
Well, I'm talking to mothers, so you all probably have realized that watching your child grow, they seem to expand their bodies. They put on weight and oh, they're getting chubby. I wonder why they're getting chubby. And then all of a sudden, their body shoots up because this process is working because we have to expand first. And then Saturn comes in and shapes it and gives it a form. It's interesting that Saturn rules the skeleton. So you think about that in terms of eating a lot of food and putting on all of this stuff. And then Saturn comes in and puts it where it's needed for the child to be growing up. And that those growth spurts keep happening over time. They don't just go like this. It just seems like
Right.
you suddenly grow. And then there's a period where the kid doesn't particularly, he's not that interested in eating, but that's when he's growing.
Yes.
So we have to see how these balance out. And we keep going through this process all the way up through the teens and even into early college, that there are still time for growth spurts.
Yeah. And you were saying too that Jupiter rules the hormones, and then
Right.
Saturn is the body, right? And the bones. So like all of these hormones start to get released, when they get into that adolescent stage, these are the key sort of adolescent planets where so many things change and they really start to be challenged and figure out who they are. At the same time, that's like this middle school age, their bodies are changing at the same time. So they're having all of this growth and expansion and then challenges as well, but their bodies are changing and they're growing at the same time. So there's so much happening on the physical, mental, emotional level at one time. So
that's why the teenage years are often difficult.
So much so. And then you get a little bit older and you think, oh, I have a little freedom. It's almost like they think they're an adult already, but they're not quite an adult. And they want to be an adult, but it's kind of scary to be an adult. And there's all this responsibility over here. So I really just want to be a kid where I can be free to do what I want. So there's a lot of this vacillating back and forth that can be tough. But freedom, Jupiter, is earned. Saturn, right?
Yes.
Real freedom is earned, and it comes with responsibility and maturity. And it
Right.
begins with trust. And I think this is the big key for parents, is to create that healthy trust. In early, we talk about helping our kids understand boundaries at a young age by getting them involved in making the rules and
Yes.
agreeing to the consequences of those rules, so that then they have respect for the rules, and then they then earn more freedom to do what they want. And that's a great process that's very Jupiterian and Saturn, as you're dealing with
Right.
Mars and all these other things, to help them grow.
Well, that's another thing too. You can look at it as your child has an experience. Maybe it's not, a wonderful experience. And so you can ask him, what did you learn from this?
Right.
Okay. We have to concentrate on the idea that mistakes are not mistakes like we think of them.
Right.
They are why we have erasers on pencils. You make a mistake because what did you learn from that? Okay. Was this good for you or bad for you? So next time this thing comes up again, you'll know which choice to make. And this all flows into the whole idea of ego. What Freud talked about is learning to balance our desires and not go overboard and obeying the rules of society.
Yep.
And sometimes that causes a little anxiety, but it doesn't have to be that way. Once you have, they have respect, and you teach them respect, but you also teach them what to learn from their decisions. So allowing children to make decisions as they grow, you can widen that experience, what they're deciding about.
Yep.
And teach them the responsibility. Then after that, they have the freedom to do what they want.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, you can play with your friends after you finish your homework,
Yeah.
things like that. Just simple things like that.
And we've talked about this. We're going to do another chat at some point on discipline versus punishment.
Right.
In childhood. And I think this is very Saturnian in terms of like, do as I say, not as I do parenting. And that disciplining, where you're actually giving them the tools to have their own accountability, personal accountability and responsibility for their actions. You're empowering them as opposed to having power over them. And
right.
You're going to get better results from that. So that's where this key of learning how to balance the discipline
Yes.
and the consequences of breaking rules that you've agreed upon, and then earning that freedom, is where you can really have some positive, powerful parenting and growth for the child, rather than this dominant, do as I say, these are the rules, break them, and you get, the kibosh, or, this is taken away, that's taken away, you lose all freedoms, and then you're just getting rebellion. Then you got rebellion coming in, right?
Right.
And a lot of problems that develop,
Yeah.
and more struggles for the parents. So it's almost like, giving them that. A child with a strong Saturn is going to have a more natural tendency to want to adult early, if you will, or be more mature for their age. And you might have to encourage that child to have a little bit more fun and be a little bit more free, and not have to worry about all these responsibilities, or worry about all these things that are, for the adults to be concerned about. And then you have the opposite, right?
Yes. I remember reading Gokulin's book on the Gokulin factor. He did research on careers.
Okay.
50,000 careers he followed. And so what he found is that people with a highly active Jupiter tend to go into politics or the theater, anywhere where they can be out there and be recognized, kind of like a Leo. But and we all know that politicians and actors tend to exaggerate. So that's so Jupiterian, isn't it? And he found that a Saturn had to do with people who are in research, people who have that patience to sit and work on something for a long time, and bear their responsibility for what they discover and so on. So, yes, so that's what they represent as far as careers go. depends on which one is more prominent as in one of those Gogolin sectors.
Oh, interesting. And then ultimately, you're learning how, Jupiter, if you have really strong Jupiter, you're going to be, or your child has a strong Jupiter, you're going to have to help them learn some discipline, right? And then if you
Yes.
have a really strong Saturn, you're going to help them learn how to let go a
Let
little bit
go.
more, have a little more freedom, and, not get so caught up in the work of it or the stress of it having to be a certain way, or that kind of thing. So loosening up and having a little bit more fun, or finding more joy in what they're doing or in their work. And then Jupiter having, stronger Jupiter having to discipline some of that excitement and that ambition. And you don't want to squelch that strong Jupiter, but help them navigate that energy and bring positive form to it so that they can be productive, because you've
Right.
got mutability when you're talking Sagittarius energy. So you're dealing with the mutability. So based on the sign your child's Jupiter is in, or your Jupiter is in, you're going to know how that mutability is, is it in an earth sign? So is that comfortable or uncomfortable? Is it in a fire sign like Leo, where you're really going to add to that exaggeration? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's understanding the placement of Saturn and Jupiter, and then also the sign they're in, the house they're in, and then the aspects they're making. What if these two are an aspect to each other, a hard aspect in particular? So we're going to go into in the masterclass even the aspects, the hard aspects, conjunctions with other planets, squares or oppositions, that are again going to add another level of how well the child is going to be able to manage the expansion process and the forming, being productive and forming that expression into something productive.
That's a good example of when you think about Mars in Capricorn, because here you have this initiating
Yep.
drive of that Aries ruled by Mars,
Yep.
but it's being honed and disciplined. And so you quite often find that as a very important thing to notice, because
Yep.
you'll see the kid has some athletic ability. Doesn't mean he'll be an athlete,
Right.
but that's another Mars. Mars has to do with athletes and military.
Yes. Well, also just
So,
that willpower and that drive and
right,
persistence. I
right,
personally have Mars in Aries, right, in its own sign. However, it's in the 10th house. So that placement does help me discipline that Mars and not be totally impulsive, and be a little bit more strategic about the directions I take or the things I do. And it slows me down immensely, which can make me frustrated at times, but it's helpful and I see the benefit of that. Right.
right.
So
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, you're getting that, Jupiter is not necessarily comfortable in Capricorn, but if you can embrace the benefit of what that placement can do, or if Saturn is in square to Jupiter, right, in the chart, or in opposition, learning how to balance that. And even like a square, we may actually use this as an example in the workshop, but my son has Jupiter square Pluto. So there can be this sort of vacillation between overconfidence and a complete lack of confidence. That's
Mm-hmm.
the other thing. Jupiter is confidence, right?
Yes.
And Saturn is a little bit like fearful and a little more reserved
Cautious.
and cautious. Exactly. And so there's that blend.
Jupiter's the risk taker.
Right. And Saturn's like, wait, man, don't break the rules, or that's scary. Something might happen.
Yeah.
So it's that vacillation between really going for it and having confidence, and then being completely, lost in self-doubt or afraid. So it's really
Right.
important to understand that they call them growing pains for a reason. They're painful. And it doesn't really end, right? I mean, we're, like you said, the Jupiter Saturn like oppositions, Jupiter, I mean, the Uranus opposition, and then you have another Saturn opposition. Like, this is part of life. It's the evolution and the journey of becoming, moving towards our sun, right? Which you're going to,
Becoming, yes.
right? The journey of becoming. And so the growth cycle continues. And when these young children are in those early stages, in those early cycles, particularly that first cycle, those early ones under 7, right? Those first 7 years being so important, that first Saturn square. During those times is where parents can really lay the foundation. I remember learning when I was first started studying all this when I had my son too, about the first 7 years being so important and feeling like, oh man, I ultimately have the first 7 years to lay the foundation. And it's not that you can't
Exactly.
change after that. Like if you're coming into astrology for parenting and your child's over 7, it doesn't mean that you can't learn a ton and be able to help your child from that point. It's just going to help you identify where there may be struggles, where things can really, where you can make strategic changes to support your child from here. And sort of also know, hey man, I did all right. I didn't even have this astrology stuff, and I was doing the things that I needed to do, right? Because you can
Right.
take parenting classes and mommy and me programs. I mean, there's a million ways. Astrology can just validate what you already know and have been doing if you've been consciously parenting, your whole child's life. So that's what I find
Right.
is so powerful, is that astrology can be validating,
Yeah, the
looking
problem
back.
with parenting is that they don't give you a handbook for it. I mean,
No,
it's
they
like you
don't,
have to make it.
but the astrology
They have a
provides
lot
that.
of books out there, and that can be confusing too,
Yes, so
because
true.
there's different ways that people see are beneficial for raising children. That may not be for your child.
Exactly, and
You
that's
really
what
have to
I
know
did.
your child.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
I read
right.
so many parenting books, and then you're like, but that's not my child. And that's where learning and knowing the astrology was like, oh, I understand now. So it was like it helped me even take that information and utilize it, and pull the parts that I knew were going to work for my child.
Right.
And that's the benefit of these two things together. That's why parenting, classes and learning how to communicate with your child, and certain listening skills, and communication skills or negotiation skills we talk about all the time, and help, and those are really important skills to know as parents and to help and to teach our children life skills. And then the astrology, I think, really just is the guidebook that really goes, oh, but my child, this is where they're going to struggle, or this is where
Right.
things are going to maybe come easier for them, and where things are not, and how I can then support them. I have
Right.
more to work with. I mean, information is power. I mean, I have Jupiter and Sag. Like, the information is like, the knowledge is power,
Knowledge is
and
power.
the more you have, the more can work with, um, what to help, support your kids. So I've been
Right.
like super excited about this program. We've been working on it for a while, and we were like, oh, we'll just do Jupiter and then we'll do Saturn. And then we're like, wait a minute, these two go together like inextricably.
Right.
They work together, they're important together. And so we decided to bring them together,
Especially for development,
Yes.
and remember that you're laying a structure from the very beginning of how this child is going to interact with his environment or her environment. So you want to, I know all mothers want to do the best that they can to make their child happy. Uh,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
somehow or other, they have to also understand that they need to teach their child that too, that the child has to determine for himself when he makes a decision. Is it, I just want to go off and have fun? Or do I want to spend all my time working? No, you want to balance those things. You want to realize that, oh, I get to do this, but then I get to go to the park, or
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
So there's always that to use as a reward. Freedom comes from fulfilling your responsibilities and
Yes. Yeah.
having respect for boundaries.
Yes. And I understand I think it comes with age, but I know one of the frustrations my son is having. And I always had the same question as a student. It was like, you're spending all this time in school and you're learning all this stuff, this structured time, structured learning. Why do I have to come home and do more homework? Why can't that be my earned freedom time that I spent those hours in school? Like, I wish the education world would be like, why do we have to do so much homework? It really just is daunting for the kids, and I'm like, I don't make the rules. It's a valid point. I can totally relate. I can understand the frustration, because then you don't have the teacher at home to answer questions, and the parents not quite sure what you've been learning. So you're trying to help. And it creates all this stress at home when they should be free to like be with their families and do other things or do fun things and have that freedom at home.
Well, I think homework should be something that's set up for when the child's ready for it. They need the freedom after they get out of school to do what they want, to have some freedom, to have some fun, to play with their friends or whatever.
Yes.
But then we're going to come home, we're going to have dinner, and then that's homework time.
Yes.
So
you need to break
you
it
learn
up
how to
way.
balance these things. Yes.
You have to have those breaks, it's really, really important. Awesome. Well, this is so
And
good. I mean,
understanding your child's temperament is important.
right, exactly. I mean,
Like the
learning,
highly distractible child we talked about, yes, making boundaries smaller so they
yes,
have more frequent breaks because they need them. So temperament
yes.
comes into it too.
I learned that from you, Cornelia, definitely when I took your course all those years ago and met you and Joseph was younger. And I realized, oh yeah, he does have that distractibility for sure. And forgetting things and like getting distracted like was so accurate. I had witnessed that. And now I could, again, knowing the astrology, I was able to put that
Yes.
together, right? In
Yes.
context. And then I was able to no, hey, you need breaks. Work on this, for a little while, or come home and have your break, have a snack, relax, release the day a little bit and then refocus. And I'm realizing now, like, he likes to come home and get it out of the way because then he wants his freedom, but he's still so wrapped up in the day, it's hard to focus and settle. And so it's encouraging him, look, have the balance. It's okay. Take the break, take the dog out, get some fresh air, and then come and focus on it, So again, balance. Okay, so let's kind of wrap up with a few parenting tips and strategies for Jupiter and Saturn for parents. What would you say are some of the top tips for parents, or your biggest, would you say the strongest things for parents to remember in terms of working with Saturn and Jupiter?
Well, I think it's the same idea of balance, that kids need to have fun because they learn through play.
Yep.
They learn through exposure. If you take your kids to museums or art museums or science museums or kid museums, like the Discovery Museum, it's wonderful because they get to try out all kinds of things on their own, which expands their learning and their awareness. So exposure to different cultures is important too. That helps them learn respect for other cultures.
Yeah.
You could do that well through food,
Yeah.
Our programs or books about different countries. So they're exposed to the idea that there are other people who live differently than we do.
Right.
And that's okay. Differences are fine. We don't want to put them down just because somebody's different than us. That doesn't make them bad.
Right.
So they have to learn how to respect that. And the Saturn it comes back to always boundaries. We don't want to have the child go overboard with, like I do with I have Jupiter and Cancer in the second house. So it's always easy for me to give money out to people than it is for me to save it. Okay. But we have to teach kids also boundaries so that they understand that they can't be a doormat for somebody.
Yeah.
That's where boundaries come in. They have to learn how to say, is this good for me or bad for me? Because they're going to confront that all the way through school. They're going to run into people who are nasty or mean or racist or whatever. And we have to understand how we can deal with that in a positive way.
Yeah.
So the more you expose a child to different cultures and different places, and they expand their view of the world. And so that's exactly what we want to do. But at the same time, we want to learn the boundaries, that because people are different doesn't make them different in the same sense as we're all part of the same human race.
Right.
Okay. Yes.
Right. Exactly. And even toward I would say the balance of fearfulness and fearlessness. This thing where Saturn is our fears and our apprehensions, and where we're really extremely cautious, and where we on the Jupiter side can be reckless or overly confident or not really able to see the forest for the trees, so that you don't make mistakes or put yourself in danger and things like that. So learning where in the chart
Right.
Jupiter is going to be this expansive point, and then where Saturn is going to be where there's a little bit more hesitation or fear, or slow
Well, they're
to move along.
necessary. If you didn't have Saturn, you might be taking risks that would hurt you.
Right.
You have to think, is this good for me or bad for me? What are the odds that I might hurt myself?
Right.
Uh, this
Calculated
will
risk.
not.
Saturn
This
is calculated risk, right?
There you go. There you go. Calculated risk. I like that. Yes.
Yes, that's really great way of working with it, calculated
Mhm.
risk, and I think that we've talked too about how the family often instills the belief in the child based on the culture and the belief system that you're raised in. And then as you get older and you have more exposure to the world, that might change. You discover
Mhm.
what you really think about the world and what you really believe. And you start
Mhm.
to come into your own, belief system and sense of truth for yourself. And for some people, that can be harder if they've been raised in a really strong religious family, or with really high expectations in certain areas, whether it's academic or in career, or pushed to do something that your parents wanted you to do, and those types of things. So there's this breaking free and finding out what you really want and coming into your own in that way as well, and finding your purpose. Saturn, where there may have been limits and struggles that ultimately help you overcoming those, help you really find your purpose and your place in the world and your work in the world and what you're here to really contribute. So
Yeah.
it's a really
And I
powerful
think
combo.
the last place for that, of course, is during the teens, because that's when the teens are looking at other people and other cultures and other way they do things and comparing them to their own family and saying, well,
Right.
we do it this way and they do it that way, and deciding for yourself what you think is better.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, you can, and I've talked to many parents who have, come into astrology out of a very strong faith-based family that didn't necessarily believe in it. And the real mature way is to say, that was what I was brought up in, but it isn't what I believe. And having the support to kind of go your own way and live your own life. And so if you're a parent and you think that I want to instill these values and these belief systems that I grew up in and are really important, but then allow your child the freedom to explore and figure out what they believe, I think is fair, right? That's balance, because I think it's important
Right.
to have
Yep.
principles and values, and even faith, strong faith. Jupiter is faith, and belief and self-belief and personal belief. And it's the biggest thing. It is a journey, Jupiter,
Yes.
to
Right.
find real true self-belief. and
Yeah.
and and it's each of our journey in finding who we are, and believing in ourselves, or believing in something higher, and whatever that is for you,
Hmm.
you know
Right.
and there can be expectations that hold, the challenge that, when you have, the conflict with Saturn
Mm.
sometimes.
Well, Jupiter is like the journey, and Saturn is like creating the map.
Right. Yeah. It's like, where do I want to go? Like, I just can't fly off the handle. I need to like make a plan.
Right.
Right. So these are great planets, work together for very, very important reasons in life and in the
Right.
developmental process. So that's why I thought it was really important for us to talk about them together. It's really hard to talk about them separately. In astrology, we like to dive into a class and dive into one thing, and then of course see how it fits into the whole. But these two I really think are important to work together and see how they work together in the whole. So that's what we're going to do, is dive into these two for that next double masterclass, and hope you guys will join the wait list and be a part of it. In the meantime,
Yes.
don't forget, in our classroom on my website, nurturingastrology.com, there is already the intro to temperament. The great workshops we did on Mars and Venus are there in terms of behavior and relationships,
Mercury and lifestyles.
Mercury and learning styles. And we've also already had a lot of great talks on these different things, the Aries and Libra axis, Mars and Venus. So we've done a lot of other great conversations and circle time chats on all of these things. So definitely check out all the great talks that we've done already to gather more information. Come over and ask questions in the Conscious Parenting with Astrology Facebook group. We'd love to, we're always in there answering questions. And yeah, definitely like and follow and subscribe and all that good stuff, and stay in touch. And stay tuned for more. We're really excited about this next part of our journey together, teaching about astrology for parenting. Thanks so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you gained some great astrology insight and inspiration from today's show. I'd love to hear, so drop me a comment or share in a review. Check out the show notes for all the details and links about today's episode, how you can connect with me on social or work with me directly. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Oh, and for my moms out there, be sure to join my private Conscious Parenting with Astrology Moms group on Facebook. Come join a growing community of like-minded mamas supporting each other in the hardest job in the world with the help of astrology. Hope to see you over there. Take care and keep nurturing the nature, friends. I'll see you on the next episode.